April 12, 1943, 14:30 hours. Stavka Headquarters, Moscow. Major Alexei Vasilevsky stood before the situation map. Red pins marked Soviet positions. Blue pins marked German forces. The map showed the Eastern Front from Leningrad to the Black Sea. 2,500 kilometers of war. Millions of men. Thousands of tanks. The largest military confrontation in human history. But Vasilevsky wasn't looking at the entire front. He was focused on one sector, Central Russia, the Kursk salient, a bulge in the Soviet lines, 190 kilometers wide, 120 kilometers deep. It jutted into German-held territory, a tempting target, a vulnerable position, a trap waiting to spring. He had spent 6 weeks analyzing German logistics, railway movements, fuel consumption patterns, troop concentrations, equipment transfers, supply depot construction, every piece of data he could gather, every intelligence report, every reconnaissance photograph, every intercepted radio transmission. He had assembled them into a comprehensive picture. And that picture showed something terrifying. The Germans were preparing a massive offensive, the largest operation since Operation Barbarossa. They were going to attack the Kursk salient, attempt to encircle Soviet forces, cut off the bulge, trap hundreds of thousands of soldiers, destroy them, turn the tide of the war. Let's pause here for a moment. If you find value in stories like this, you can support the channel by liking the video and subscribing. After watching, leaving a brief comment, even a simple word, helps more than you might expect. Your support keeps these stories alive and visible. Thank you. Let's move on. Vasilevsky knew this with mathematical certainty. The numbers didn't lie. The data was clear. The conclusion was inevitable. He had requested this meeting to warn Stavka, to show them what was coming, to convince them to prepare. His presentation was ready. 47 pages of analysis, charts, graphs, calculations, everything documented, everything proved. The room filled with senior officers, General Georgy Zhukov, Deputy Supreme Commander, Hero of Moscow, Hero of Stalingrad, Marshal Alexander Vasilevsky, Chief of General Staff. No relation to the analyst despite sharing surnames. General Konstantin Rokossovsky, Commander of Central Front, General Nikolai Vatutin, Commander of Voronezh Front. These men commanded millions of soldiers, controlled the fate of the Soviet Union. Alexei Vasilevsky began his presentation. Comrades, I have analyzed German logistics for the past 6 weeks. The data indicates a major offensive targeting the Kursk salient. I can predict the date, the location, the forces involved, everything. Marshal Vasilevsky interrupted. You can predict a German offensive with mathematics? Yes, Comrade Marshal. War isn't mathematics. War is chaos, unpredictable, dynamic. War requires logistics. Logistics follows mathematical laws, predictable, quantifiable. Zhukov leaned forward. Explain. Alexei opened his folder, pulled out the first chart. German forces require fuel. Tiger tanks consume 270 liters per 100 kilometers. Panther tanks consume 200 liters. Panzer IV tanks consume 210 liters. The Germans have concentrated approximately 2,700 tanks in this sector. To move them 100 kilometers requires approximately 5.8 million liters of fuel. He pointed to railway lines on the map. German logistics depend on rail transport. These railways have limited capacity, approximately 40 trains per day maximum. Each train carries 120 tons. To stockpile sufficient fuel for the offensive requires 68 days of continuous rail transport. They began stockpiling on February 14th. That gives them adequate fuel by April 23rd. He pulled out another chart. Detailed railway analysis. Observe the traffic patterns. Oral Railway Junction handled an average of 23 trains per day in January. By March, That increased to 38 trains per day. This 65% increase indicates major supply operation. The cargo manifests, when we can intercept them, show petroleum products, lubricants, aviation fuel, tank fuel, everything needed for armored offensive. Furthermore, he continued, the Germans are constructing fuel storage facilities. We have aerial reconnaissance photographs. Here, here, and here. He pointed to map locations. Each facility has capacity for approximately 2 million liters. Standard German construction for forward fuel depots. 3 facilities equals 6 million liters. That's enough fuel to move their entire panzer force 200 kilometers and sustain operations for 14 days. Zhukov was now paying close attention. 14 days specifically? Based on German fuel consumption data from previous operations, at Stalingrad, their armored units consumed approximately 130,000 liters daily for mixed combat operations. They have approximately 21 panzer divisions in this sector. That's 273,000 liters per day. 6 million liters divided by 273,000 equals 21.9 days. But that assumes optimal conditions. Combat consumption is higher. Weather affects efficiency. Mechanical failures increase fuel use. Realistically, 14 days maximum before fuel exhaustion forces operational pause. Marshal Vasilevsky interrupted. You're calculating fuel deliveries? Fuel, ammunition, food, medical supplies, spare parts, everything an army needs. All of it follows mathematics. Consider ammunition. A German infantry division fires approximately 12 tons of small arms ammunition per day during intensive combat. They have 43 infantry divisions in this sector. That's 516 tons daily. Artillery is worse. Each howitzer fires approximately 60 rounds per day during offensive operations. They have 10,000 artillery pieces. Average shell weight is 45 kilograms. That's 27,000 tons of artillery ammunition per day. He showed another calculation. For a 2-week offensive, they need 378,000 tons of ammunition. Each railcar carries 40 tons of ammunition safely. That requires 9,450 railcar loads. Spread over 68 days of preparation, that's 139 railcars per day. The German railway system in this sector can handle that capacity. Barely. But it's possible. And the traffic we're observing matches these requirements exactly. Rokossovsky studied the numbers carefully. What about troop concentrations? Alexei pulled out a personnel tracking document. German force structure. We identify divisions by radio intercepts, prisoner interrogations, reconnaissance. I track their locations over time, plot their movements. This reveals patterns. He showed a series of maps, each dated, January through April, blue pins showing German divisions. January, standard defensive deployment, units spread evenly along the front. February, concentration begins. 3 divisions move from France to central Russia. 4 divisions transfer from Army Group South. March, acceleration. 12 more divisions arrive. April, final positioning. 17 divisions total have relocated to face the Kursk salient. This is not defensive redeployment. This is offensive concentration. Each division has specific supply requirements, he continued. Infantry division, 800 tons per day. Panzer division, 1,200 tons per day. Mountain division, 600 tons per day. I calculate total based on division types we've identified. Current German force concentration requires 16,400 tons of supplies daily. That's 137 railcars per day just for sustainment, plus the additional stockpiling for offensive. The German railway system is operating at 93% capacity. This is maximum effort logistics. Vatutin asked, how accurate are these division identifications? 91% confidence. We confirm through multiple sources. radio call signs, prisoner statements, captured documents, reconnaissance photography. When 3 independent sources identify the same unit in the same location, confidence is high. 17 divisions have triple source confirmation. 4 have double source. 2 are single source but highly probable. And all this mathematics tells you they attack in July? The mathematics tells me when they'll have sufficient supplies. They can't attack before supplies accumulate. They won't wait long after supplies are ready. Therefore, attack timing is constrained by logistics. Fuel accumulation, 68 days. Ammunition accumulation, 68 days. Troop concentration, 90 days. Final preparations, 14 days. This gives earliest attack date July 3rd. But they need contingency, weather delays, coordination problems. Therefore, July 5th is most probable. Saturday. Good weather historically. Allows weekend mobilization without alerting workforce. Germans prefer weekend offensive starts for operational security. Zhukov leaned back. You've calculated the day of the week? I've calculated everything calculable. Day of week is statistically relevant. Germans launched 63% of major offensives on weekends or Mondays during 1941, 1942. This isn't random. It's operational pattern. They use weekends to mask final preparations, road movements, last-minute positioning, everything that could alert defenders. This is extraordinary detail. This is logistics analysis. Every army leaves mathematical fingerprints, fuel consumption, ammunition expenditure, supply transportation, troop movements. All of it generates data. That data reveals intentions. You just have to compile it, calculate it, understand what it means. Marshal Vasilevsky shook his head. You cannot predict war with equations. I just did. This is speculation, guesswork dressed up with numbers. Every number I've presented is verified. Railway capacity, measured, fuel storage, photographed, division locations, confirmed, ammunition requirements, calculated from doctrinal usage rates and observed German behavior. There's no speculation, just mathematics applied to observable reality. Data can be misinterpreted. Numbers don't lie. The Germans need specific quantities of supplies. Those quantities require specific transport capacity. That capacity requires specific time. Time is measurable. Therefore, offensive timing is predictable. This isn't mysticism. This is engineering. You wouldn't build a bridge without calculating load capacity. Why would you fight a war without calculating logistics capacity? The room went silent. Alexei had just predicted a German offensive, down to a 5-day window, 3 months in advance, based on mathematics, based on logistics analysis, based on data everyone else had access to, but nobody had assembled this way. Marshal Vasilevsky spoke first. You cannot predict war with equations. I just did. This is speculation, guesswork dressed up with numbers. It's analysis, based on objective data. Data can be misinterpreted. Numbers don't lie. The Germans need specific quantities of supplies. Those quantities require specific transport capacity. That capacity requires specific time. Time is measurable. Therefore, offensive timing is predictable. Zhukov interrupted. Even if your mathematics are correct, you're assuming German intentions. Maybe they're stockpiling for defense. Maybe they're preparing for operations elsewhere. Maybe your entire analysis is wrong. The quantity of supplies exceeds defensive requirements by 400%. The troop concentrations face the Kursk salient specifically. The railway priorities have shifted to this sector. Everything indicates offensive preparation, not defense, not elsewhere. Here, against Kursk. Rokossovsky was studying the documents carefully. These calculations, are you certain? Mathematics doesn't allow uncertainty. Either the equations are correct or they're wrong. I've checked them repeatedly. They're correct. But you're making assumptions. German fuel consumption, artillery expenditure, supply requirements. These are estimates. Based on observed data, German operations in 1941 and 1942, Stalingrad, Kharkov. We know their consumption patterns. We know their logistics requirements. The estimates are accurate within 5%. Marshal Vasilevsky shook his head. I don't accept this. You're telling us that a major can predict what the German High Command will do, that mathematics can reveal their strategy, that logistics analysis can replace intelligence. This is fantasy. It's science. War is not science. The argument escalated. Voices raised. Accusations flew. Alexei was called naive, arrogant, delusional. His analysis was called speculation. His mathematics were called tricks. His conclusions were called dangerous. He tried to explain. The data supported his analysis. The calculations were sound. The prediction was reliable. But nobody wanted to hear it. Nobody wanted to believe that equations could predict German operations, that a logistics analyst could see what generals couldn't. The meeting ended badly. Marshal Vasilevsky made the final decision. Your analysis is noted, but we will not base operational planning on mathematical speculation. We deploy forces based on intelligence, reconnaissance, observed enemy movements, not equations. Comrade Marshal, I'm begging you. Listen to the numbers. The Germans will attack Kursk in early July. If we prepare now, we can defeat them. If we ignore this warning, they'll achieve surprise, encircle our forces, win the battle. We're done here. Return to your duties. Alexei gathered his documents, walked out. His warning had been rejected, ignored, dismissed as fantasy. The generals didn't believe mathematics could predict war, didn't trust equations over intuition, didn't accept that logistics analysis could reveal enemy intentions. He had failed to convince them, but he hadn't failed to calculate correctly. The numbers were right. The Germans would attack. Early July. Kursk salient. He knew this with certainty. The question was, what could he do about it? April 15th. Alexei returned to his office. Small room in Stavka building. Desk covered with papers, maps, charts, calculations. He couldn't stop thinking about the meeting, about the rejection, about what was coming. His assistant, Lieutenant Pavel Sokolov, entered. How did it go? They laughed at me. Not literally? Spiritually. They think I'm crazy. Mathematics can't predict war. Equations can't replace intelligence. But your analysis is solid. Solid doesn't matter if nobody believes it. Sokolov sat down. So what do we do? Nothing. Orders are orders. We were told to stop, so we stop. You're giving up? Alexei looked at his assistant. Young man, 23 years old, mathematics degree from Moscow State University, drafted in 1941, assigned to logistics analysis because he could calculate faster than most people could read. Smart, dedicated, believed in the work. I'm not giving up. I'm adapting. What does that mean? It means Stavka won't listen, but frontline commanders might. You want to go around the chain of command? I want to warn the people who will actually fight the battle. Rokossovsky commands Central Front. He faces the northern pincer of the German attack. If I can convince him to prepare, we save half the salient. That's insubordination. That's saving lives. Sokolov nodded slowly. I'm with you. Alexei spent the next week refining his analysis, made it simpler, more direct, less theory, more practical application. Commanders didn't want equations. They wanted actionable intelligence. He gave them that. His revised report was 12 pages. It showed German force concentrations, predicted attack dates, suggested defensive preparations, identified weak points in Soviet lines, recommended reinforcement priorities, everything a commander needed to prepare for the attack. April 22nd. He traveled to Central Front headquarters. Unofficial visit. No orders, no authorization, just a logistics major with documents in a briefcase, requesting audience with General Rokossovsky. The general's aide was skeptical. "You don't have an appointment." "I have information the general needs." "What information?" "German offensive plans, predicted attack date, force composition, everything." "How do you have this information?" "I calculated it." The aide laughed. "You calculated enemy plans?" "Yes." "Are you a spy?" "I'm an analyst." "Analysts work at Stavka, not at front headquarters unannounced." "I presented at Stavka. They rejected my analysis. But it's correct. The general needs to see it." The aide was about to refuse. Then Rokossovsky himself walked past, overheard the conversation. "What's this about German plans?" Alexei snapped to attention. "Comrade General, Major Vasilevsky, logistics analysis. I've calculated German offensive timing and location. I need 15 minutes to brief you." Rokossovsky studied him. "Stavka sent you?" "Stavka rejected my analysis." "But you came anyway?" "The mathematics don't care if Stavka believes them. The Germans will attack regardless." Rokossovsky smiled slightly. "Bold statement. Come with me." They went to the operations room. Rokossovsky's staff were working. Maps, radio communications, status reports, the daily chaos of commanding a front. Rokossovsky gestured to a table. "Show me." Alexei spread his documents, explained his logistics analysis, railway capacity, fuel stockpiles, ammunition accumulation, troop concentrations. All of it pointed to one conclusion: German offensive. Kursk salient. Early July. Rokossovsky listened without interrupting, studied the charts, asked technical questions, understood the mathematics. Unlike the Stavka generals, he didn't dismiss equations as irrelevant. He saw them as data, information, intelligence gathered through unconventional means. When Alexei finished, Rokossovsky was quiet for a moment. Then he spoke. "You're telling me the Germans will attack my front on July 5th? Between July 3rd and July 7th. Most probable date is July 5th. Based on logistics calculations? Based on observable data analyzed mathematically. If you're wrong, I waste resources preparing for an attack that doesn't come. If you're right and I ignore you, the Germans achieve surprise. Encircle my armies. Destroy 300,000 men. Yes, Comrade General. Those are bad options. The third option is, I'm right, and you prepare. You defeat the German offensive. Save 300,000 men. Win the battle. Rokossovsky nodded. I like that option better. He called his chief of staff, ordered defensive preparations, anti-tank ditches, minefields, artillery positions, reserve deployments, everything needed to stop a German offensive. The staff protested. No intelligence indicated German attack. Defensive preparations would consume resources needed elsewhere. This was premature, unnecessary. Rokossovsky cut them off. I'm the commander. I'm ordering preparations. Execute. The preparations began, quietly, without announcing why. Rokossovsky didn't want to create panic, didn't want to signal to Germans that Soviets knew about the offensive. Just quietly strengthened defenses, positioned reserves, stockpiled ammunition. Made ready. The work was enormous. Rokossovsky's central front defended the northern face of the Kursk salient. 300 kilometers of frontage, 4 armies, over 700,000 men. Creating defensive positions for that many troops required massive engineering effort. Anti-tank ditches came first. Deep trenches, 4 meters wide, 3 meters deep. Angled sides too steep for tanks to cross. The engineers calculated they needed 120 kilometers of ditches. That required moving 480,000 cubic meters of earth. Each cubic meter required approximately 1 man-hour to excavate with hand tools. 480,000 man-hours. Spread across 12,000 engineers working in shifts, That meant 40 man-hours per engineer. 4 days of continuous work. The digging began April 25th. Finished April 29th. The ditches were positioned in 3 lines: forward defensive zone, main defensive zone, reserve defensive zone. Each line had continuous anti-tank ditches with only narrow gaps for friendly movement. Those gaps were covered by anti-tank guns. Tanks couldn't cross the ditches. Infantry could, but they'd be exposed to machine gun fire while crossing. The ditches channeled German attacks into killing zones. Minefields were next. Soviet doctrine called for 5,000 mines per kilometer of front during defensive operations. Rokossovsky laid 8,000 per kilometer. Over-aggressive, excessive by doctrine. But he was preparing for the largest tank attack in history. Excessive was appropriate. 8,000 mines per kilometer times 300 kilometers equals 2.4 million mines. The front's engineer units had 800,000 mines in stock. Rokossovsky requested additional supply. Moscow delivered 1.8 million more mines. Different types: anti-tank TM-41 mines, anti-personnel PMD-6 mines, anti-tank mines buried in patterns, groups of 3 or 4 mines, spaced to destroy tank tracks, disable mobility, create obstacles. The mine laying took 3 weeks, started April 25th, finished May 16th. 240,000 mines laid per week. Engineers worked in teams. 1 man dug the hole, 1 man placed the mine, 1 man armed it. 1 man marked the location on maps so Soviet forces wouldn't detonate their own mines. Each team laid approximately 30 mines per day. That required 8,000 engineer days of work. Spread across 20,000 engineers, that meant 12-hour days for 3 weeks. The minefield was extensive, dense, deadly. Average density: 8 mines per 100 square meters in priority areas, 4 mines per 100 square meters in secondary areas. Germans would have to clear paths through this. Slow, dangerous, time-consuming. Each hour spent clearing mines was 1 hour Soviet artillery could target them. Artillery positions were established in depth. Soviet doctrine called for 100 guns per kilometer during major defensive operations. Rokossovsky positioned 130 per kilometer. Again, excessive, but appropriate. 300 kilometers times 130 guns equals 39,000 artillery pieces. He had 23,000, requested more. Moscow provided 8,000 additional guns, still short, but better. The guns were positioned in 3 echelons. Forward guns could engage targets at maximum range, 14 kilometers for 152 mm howitzers. When German tanks came within range, forward guns would fire. Slow the advance, cause casualties. When Germans closed to 10 kilometers, middle echelon guns would engage. When they reached 5 kilometers, rear echelon guns would fire. Continuous artillery fire from 14 kilometers to contact. Germans would advance through non-stop bombardment. Each gun required ammunition. Soviet 150 mm howitzers fired approximately 60 rounds per day during intensive combat. 39,000 guns times 60 rounds equals 2.3 million shells per day. For 14 days of battle, that's 32 million shells. Each shell weighed 48 kilograms. Total weight: 1.5 million tons. That required 37,500 rail cars to transport. The ammunition arrived steadily, started late April, continued through June. Rail cars delivered continuously. Shells were stockpiled near gun positions, camouflaged, protected from air attack, ready for immediate use. By July 1st, Rokossovsky had 48 million shells stockpiled, enough for 21 days of intensive combat, more than adequate. Reserve formations were positioned behind the main defensive lines. Tank corps, mechanized corps, rifle divisions, everything needed for counterattacks. The reserves had to be close enough to respond quickly, but far enough to avoid German artillery. Rokossovsky positioned them 15 to 20 kilometers behind front lines, within 2 hours' march. Close enough to matter, far enough to survive initial bombardment. The defensive preparation followed Alexei's recommendations exactly. Deep defenses, multiple lines, obstacles channeling enemy into kill zones, artillery positioned for continuous fire, reserves ready for counterattack. Everything needed to stop a major offensive. But there was one more element: intelligence. Rokossovsky needed to know when the attack would start. Exact timing mattered. If the Germans attacked before Soviet artillery pre-bombardment, they'd achieve surprise. If Soviet guns fired too early, they'd waste ammunition on empty positions. Alexei's calculation said July 5th. But confirmation was needed. Rokossovsky assigned reconnaissance units to watch German positions constantly, report any changes, any movement, any indication of imminent attack. The reconnaissance teams worked around the clock, observed, reported, waited. Alexei returned to Moscow. He had done what he could, warned one commander, convinced one general. It wasn't enough. The Kursk salient had 2 fronts: Central Front under Rokossovsky in the north, Voronezh Front under Vatutin in the south. He had warned the north. The south remained unaware. May 1943. German preparations continued. Alexei tracked them. Railway movements matched his predictions. Troop concentrations grew as calculated. Fuel stockpiles accumulated on schedule. Everything confirmed his analysis. The attack was coming. July. Kursk. Exactly as he had predicted. He tried again at Stavka, requested another meeting, presented updated data. Same response: rejection. His calculations were interesting but unreliable. Mathematics couldn't predict war. They would rely on traditional intelligence, not logistics analysis. June 1943. German preparations entered final phase. The offensive was imminent. Alexei calculated 42 days until attack. He updated his analysis daily, tracked every shipment, every movement, every indicator. All of it confirmed July 5th as the attack date. He leaked his analysis to Voronezh Front. Not officially. Through back channels, junior officers who trusted mathematics more than politics. His report reached several division commanders. They quietly strengthened their positions, prepared reserves, made ready, without authorization, without explaining why. July 4th, 1943, 24 hours before the attack, German forces were positioned. 2.7 million men, 7,000 tanks, 10,000 artillery pieces, 2,800 aircraft, the largest offensive force Germany had assembled since 1941. Soviet forces waited. Rokossovsky's Central Front was ready. Deep defenses, multiple defensive lines, anti-tank guns positioned in depth, minefields extensive, artillery zeroed on approach routes, reserve tanks positioned for counterattack. Everything Alexei had recommended. Vatutin's Voronezh Front was partially ready. Some units had prepared based on leaked intelligence. Others remained unaware. The preparation was uneven, incomplete, but better than nothing. Stalin received the final intelligence briefing that evening. German offensive predicted for tomorrow. July 5th. Attack targeting Kursk salient from north and south. Stavka analysts confirmed. This matched the prediction that crazy logistics major had made 3 months ago, the one everyone had ignored. Stalin asked one question. "Where is Major Vasilevsky?" "Here, Comrade Stalin." Alexei had been summoned, didn't know why. "You predicted this attack, April 12th, told us July 5th. You were correct." "The mathematics were correct, Comrade Stalin. Why didn't we listen?" Alexei considered his answer carefully. Honesty or politics? Truth or survival? He chose honesty. "Because I'm a major. They're generals. Mathematics doesn't have rank, but people do. Nobody wanted to believe a major knew something generals didn't. Stalin nodded. That's accurate. Also stupid. But accurate. He turned to Marshal Vasilevsky. Why did we ignore this analysis? The marshal had no good answer. We assessed it as unreliable speculation. It was correct. We couldn't know that in April. Major Vasilevsky knew it in April. He told you. You rejected him. Why? Because war cannot be predicted with mathematics. Apparently it can. He did it, with logistics analysis and equations, while you relied on intelligence that told you nothing until yesterday. The room was silent. Stalin's anger was legendary. When he was displeased, people disappeared, went to gulags, got shot. Marshal Vasilevsky was sweating. Stalin turned back to Alexei. Your prediction. Is Rokossovsky's front ready? Yes, Comrade Stalin. The general prepared based on my analysis. Vatutin's front? Partially ready. Some units received leaked intelligence, others did not. Leaked by whom? By me, Comrade Stalin. You leaked classified analysis against orders? I leaked correct analysis that would save Soviet lives. Stalin almost smiled. You have courage, probably stupidity, but courage. What happens tomorrow? The Germans attack as predicted. Central Front stops them. Vatutin's front fights hard, but suffers heavier casualties due to incomplete preparation. The battle lasts 2 to 3 weeks. Germans fail to encircle the salient. Soviet forces counterattack. The offensive becomes Soviet victory. You've calculated the entire battle? I've calculated logistics. That determines outcomes. Germans have fuel for 14 days of offensive operations. After that, they must halt, reorganize. That's when we counterattack. They can't sustain operations without supply. Mathematics decides the battle. And if you're wrong about the outcome? Then I'm wrong. Court-martial me, but I'm not wrong. The numbers prove it. July 5th, 1943. Through to 30 hours. The largest artillery barrage in human history began. Soviet forces fired first, 8,600 guns, targeting German assembly areas, disrupting the offensive before it started. This wasn't random. Alexei's analysis had identified German positions, calculated their locations based on logistics. Artillery struck exactly where he predicted. For 30 hours. German artillery responded. 10,000 guns. The sound was apocalyptic, continuous thunder that shook the earth. The barrage lasted 2 hours, targeting Soviet defenses, attempting to destroy fortifications before the attack. 6:30 hours. German tanks advanced. Northern pincer from Orel, southern pincer from Belgorod. 2,700 tanks. The earth trembled. Dust clouds rose hundreds of meters. This was blitzkrieg. German combined arms warfare perfected over 4 years. Infantry, armor, artillery, air support, all coordinated, all devastating. The northern pincer consisted of Model's 9th Army, 335,000 men, 900 tanks, primarily Panzer IV and Panther tanks, some Tiger Wind heavies, the newest German armor. The Panthers were particularly dangerous, 75mm guns with high velocity, frontal armor 80 millimeters thick, sloped at 55 degrees, effective thickness 140 millimeters. Soviet 76mm anti-tank guns couldn't penetrate that at standard engagement ranges. The Tigers were worse, 88mm guns, 100 millimeters of frontal armor, weight 56 tons. These machines were nearly invulnerable to Soviet anti-tank weapons. Only flank shots or close-range ambushes could destroy them. The Germans had 45 Tigers in the northern attack. Each one was a steel fortress. They advanced in echelon formation, Tigers leading, Panthers in second line, Panzer IVs supporting, infantry following in half-tracks. The formations were textbook perfect, disciplined, coordinated, exactly what German armor doctrine prescribed. They hit Soviet defenses at 6:45 hours and immediately encountered problems. The minefield was denser than expected. The lead Tigers triggered mines within 200 meters of Soviet lines. Multiple explosions, track damage. 3 Tigers immobilized within the first 5 minutes. Not destroyed, just disabled. Unable to move. But they could still shoot. Their crews continued fighting from static positions. The Panthers attempted to navigate around the disabled Tigers. Found more mines. 5 Panthers destroyed in the first kilometer. Their crews abandoned the vehicles. German infantry moved forward to clear mine paths. Soviet machine guns engaged them. Casualties were immediate, heavy. The infantry couldn't clear mines under sustained fire. German combat engineers moved up. Bangalore torpedoes, explosive charges. They began clearing paths through the minefield. Slow work, dangerous work. Each path took 15 minutes to clear. Soviet artillery targeted the engineers. 150 mm shells impacted around them. Explosions, shrapnel, more casualties. By 7:30 hours, the Germans had cleared 4 narrow paths through the forward minefield. The tanks funneled through these gaps, concentrated, vulnerable. Soviet anti-tank guns engaged from prepared positions. The 76 mm guns couldn't penetrate Panthers frontally, but they targeted tracks, damaged mobility. The 85 mm guns, fewer in number but more powerful, could penetrate Panther side armor. They waited for flank shots, picked their targets, fired accurately. The German advance slowed dramatically, not stopped, but slower than planned. Much slower. By 800 hours, they had advanced only 3 kilometers. Their initial objective was 8 kilometers. They were falling behind schedule, behind logistics calculations. Fuel consumption was higher than expected. Combat maneuvering burned fuel faster than road movement. The Tigers were particularly fuel-hungry. Each one consumed 500 liters per 100 kilometers of combat movement. At this rate, they'd run out of fuel by day 5 instead of day 14. The Southern Pincer faced similar problems. Hoth's 4th Panzer Army, 349,000 men, 1,200 tanks, heavier concentration, more Tigers, 73 Tiger tanks compared to 45 in the north, but also more mines, more obstacles, more prepared defenses. The southern advance encountered the anti-tank ditches at 7:15 hours. The ditches were too wide for tanks to cross, 4 meters, impossible to bridge without engineering equipment. German pioneers moved forward with fascine bundles, dropped them into ditches, created crude bridges. This took time. Time Soviet artillery used effectively. The Soviet guns fired on pre-registered coordinates. They'd ranged the ditches during preparation. Knew exact distances. Knew exact elevations. When German engineers appeared at the ditches, artillery fire was immediate, accurate, deadly. Engineers were killed before they could complete bridges. Infantry tried to cross the ditches on foot. Machine gun fire cut them down. The ditches became killing zones exactly as designed. German tactics adapted. They called in air support. Stuka dive bombers attacked Soviet artillery positions. Luftwaffe had committed 2,800 aircraft to the offensive. 600 were at Kursk. They struck Soviet guns, suppressed some positions, destroyed others, but couldn't suppress everything. Too many targets, too dispersed. Soviet anti-aircraft fire was effective. 11 Stukas shot down by 1,000 hours. The air support continued but at reduced intensity. By 1,200 hours, both pincers had advanced approximately 8 kilometers, half the planned distance. German casualty reports showed 12,000 casualties. 163 tanks destroyed or disabled. Ammunition consumption was 30% above planned rates. Fuel consumption was 40% above planned rates. The offensive was consuming resources faster than logistics could sustain. Alexei tracked the battle from Moscow. His mathematical model predicted German fuel exhaustion by day 14, but actual consumption was faster. He recalculated. At current rates, fuel exhaustion would occur by day 10, July 15th, instead of July 19th. The Germans had even less time than he initially calculated. He sent updated analysis to Rokossovsky. The general received it at 14:30 hours, read it carefully, understood the implications. The Germans were burning through supplies. They couldn't sustain this pace. If Soviet defenses held for 10 days, German offensive capability would collapse. Simple mathematics, inevitable outcome. Rokossovsky ordered his troops to hold. No counterattacks yet, just defense. Make the Germans pay for every kilometer. Force them to consume ammunition, burn fuel, exhaust resources. Time was on Soviet side. Every hour they held was 1 hour closer to German fuel exhaustion. The battle continued for days. July 6th, July 7th, July 8th. The German advance slowed progressively. 10 kilometers on day 1, 7 kilometers on day 2, 5 kilometers on day 3, 3 kilometers on day 4. The defensive depth was absorbing the offensive, exactly as designed, exactly as calculated. German commanders recognized the problem. Model reported to Hitler on July 8th. The offensive was failing. Casualties were too high. Progress was too slow. Fuel consumption was unsustainable. He recommended withdrawing, calling off the attack. Hitler refused, ordered continuation, push harder, break through. Victory was close, but victory wasn't close. Victory was mathematically impossible. The Germans had advanced 30 kilometers. The Soviet defensive depth was 90 kilometers. They'd penetrated 1/3. At current casualty rates, they'd lose their entire army before reaching Soviet rear areas. At current fuel consumption, they'd run out of supplies within 2 days. The mathematics were clear. The offensive had failed. July 12th. 1 week into the battle, German offensive had gained minimal ground, 30 kilometers at maximum penetration, far short of their objectives. Casualties were catastrophic. Over 200,000 German soldiers killed or wounded, 1,800 tanks destroyed. The offensive was failing. July 15th. Germans began withdrawing. The offensive was over. Failed to encircle Kursk. Failed to trap Soviet armies. Failed to achieve any strategic objective. The largest German offensive on the Eastern Front had been defeated. Soviet casualties were severe. Over 250,000 killed or wounded. But they had won. The defensive preparations worked. The German offensive was stopped. The initiative was shifting to Soviet forces. Alexei tracked the battle from Moscow, compared outcomes to predictions. His mathematics had been accurate. Attack date, July 5th. Correct. Attack location, Kursk salient. Correct. German fuel endurance, 14 days. Correct. The Germans ran out of supplies exactly when he calculated, had to withdraw exactly when predicted. Mathematics had predicted the entire battle. Not perfectly. War was still chaotic, still deadly. But the broad outline was calculable. Logistics determined capabilities. Capabilities determined outcomes. This was the future of military analysis. July 20th. Stalin summoned Alexei again. Your predictions were accurate. Yes, Comrade Stalin. Everything happened as you calculated. The mathematics were sound. Yet Stavka ignored you. They preferred traditional intelligence. Traditional intelligence told us nothing until the last minute. Your mathematics told us 3 months in advance. Which is more valuable? Mathematics, Comrade Stalin. I agree. He turned to Marshal Vasilevsky. Effective immediately, Major Vasilevsky is promoted to colonel. He will establish a new department, logistics analysis for strategic prediction. He will have direct access to all intelligence, all reconnaissance, all data. His analyses will be briefed directly to me, not filtered through Stavka. Marshal Vasilevsky protested. Comrade Stalin, this undermines the chain of command. The chain of command ignored correct analysis. I'm creating a parallel system that won't ignore it. Objections? No, Comrade Stalin. Good. Colonel Vasilevsky, you have unlimited resources. Build your department, train analysts, develop methods. I want predictive analysis for all future operations, German and Soviet. If mathematics can predict enemy actions, we use mathematics. Alexei was shocked. Promoted 4 ranks, given department command, direct access to Stalin, all because he had been right when everyone said he was wrong. But there was a cost. Rokossovsky had prepared his defenses, saved 300,000 men, stopped the German offensive. He had listened to the mathematics when Stavka wouldn't. He was the hero of Kursk. Vatutin's front had suffered heavier casualties, 25,000 more dead than Rokossovsky's, because preparation was incomplete, because warnings came late, because generals had ignored mathematics until too late. Those deaths were preventable. If Stavka had listened in April, if preparations had been complete, if everyone had been ready, 25,000 men died because generals didn't believe equations. Alexei understood this, felt the weight of it. He had been right. That didn't make the deaths easier, didn't reduce the guilt. He had warned them. They hadn't listened. People died. Simple causation. Tragic outcome. August 1943. Alexei established his new department, recruited mathematicians, statisticians, logistics specialists, taught them his methods, how to track railway movements, calculate supply accumulation, predict offensive timing, turn data into predictions. The department grew. 50 analysts by September, 100 by October. They tracked German operations across the entire Eastern Front, predicted offensives, identified weak points, calculated logistics endurance, everything that mathematics could reveal about enemy capabilities. Their predictions were remarkable. They forecasted German withdrawal from Ukraine, calculated timing within 5 days, predicted German defensive positions in Belarus, identified supply bottlenecks that would slow German reinforcement. All of it accurate, all of it useful. Soviet operations planning began incorporating logistics analysis, not replacing intelligence, supplementing it. Traditional reconnaissance showed what enemies were doing now. Mathematics showed what they could do tomorrow. Combined analysis gave complete picture. The war continued. But Soviet planning improved. Surprises became rarer. German offensives were anticipated. Soviet counterattacks targeted logistics choke points. The mathematics of war became standard practice. November 1944. Alexei received German intelligence documents, captured during offensive in Poland, Wehrmacht logistics reports, supply calculations, offensive planning. He read them carefully, compared them to his own methods. The Germans had been doing the same thing, calculating Soviet logistics, predicting Soviet capabilities, using mathematics to forecast operations. They had known about Kursk, known Soviet forces were stronger than reported, known the offensive was risky. They attacked anyway, because Hitler ordered it, because politics overrode mathematics, because generals obeyed rather than calculating. The German logistics analysts had been right. Their warnings were ignored, just like Alexei's warnings were ignored. Both sides had the mathematics. One side listened, the other didn't. That decided the battle. That decided the war. May 1945. Germany surrendered. The war in Europe ended. Alexei's department had provided analysis for every major Soviet operation since Kursk. Their predictions were accurate 73% of the time. Not perfect, but far better than guessing. Far better than intuition alone. After the war, Alexei was interviewed about Kursk, about the prediction, about being ignored. The interviewer asked standard questions. He gave careful answers. Then came the real question. Do you resent Stavka for ignoring you? Alexei was quiet, then answered honestly. Resentment doesn't bring back the dead. 25,000 men died because preparation was incomplete, because warnings came late, because generals trusted intuition over mathematics. Do I resent that? Yes. Does it matter? No. The war is over. The dead are dead. Resentment changes nothing. But you were right. Doesn't that vindicate you? Being right isn't vindication when people die. If I had been more persuasive in April, if I had explained better, if I had made them understand, maybe they would have listened. Maybe those 25,000 would have lived. My mathematics were correct. My communication failed. That's not vindication, that's tragedy. What did you learn? That mathematics describes reality, but humans decide whether to accept reality. The numbers showed what would happen. People chose not to believe the numbers. That's not a mathematics problem. That's a human problem. Do you think mathematics can prevent wars? No. Mathematics can predict wars, calculate outcomes, reveal consequences. But preventing wars requires different mathematics, political mathematics, economic mathematics. Things I don't calculate. I just show what happens when political decisions lead to military operations. Some call you the man who saved Kursk. I'm the man who calculated Kursk. Rokossovsky saved Kursk. He listened when others didn't. He prepared when others mocked. He trusted mathematics when politics said not to. He's the hero. I'm just the analyst who was right. The interview was published, became part of the historical record. But it missed the real story. The real story wasn't that Alexei predicted Kursk. The real story was that everyone ignored him until it was almost too late. He predicted the largest tank battle in history, calculated the date within 48 hours, 3 months in advance, using logistics analysis and mathematics, presented his analysis to Stavka, to generals, to the highest command. They laughed, not literally, but spiritually, dismissed his work as fantasy, told him mathematics can't predict war, ignored his warnings, rejected his analysis, called him crazy. Then everything happened exactly as he predicted. July 5th. Kursk salient. Massive German offensive. Everything. The generals who ignored him were shocked. Stalin was shocked. Everyone was shocked except Alexei, because he knew. The mathematics don't lie. Generals do. What he said after the battle became legendary. Simple statement, delivered without emotion. I told you, the numbers don't lie. You chose not to believe them. That's not a mathematics failure. That's your failure. They were shocked by his accuracy, shocked that equations predicted reality, shocked that logistics analysis revealed enemy intentions, shocked that a major knew what generals didn't. But the real shock wasn't that he was right. The real shock was how obvious it should have been. The data was available to everyone. The calculations weren't secret. The methods weren't classified. Anyone could have done the analysis. Anyone could have seen what was coming. They just didn't, because mathematics wasn't prestigious, wasn't heroic, wasn't what generals did. Generals commanded, made decisions, trusted intuition, experience, not equations. That almost lost them Kursk. That almost cost 300,000 lives. That almost gave Germany the initiative on the Eastern Front. Almost. Except one analyst refused to accept no for an answer. One major calculated the truth and kept pushing until someone listened. One mathematician changed the largest battle in history by being right when everyone said he was wrong. They ignored his math. Reality didn't. The Germans attacked exactly when he predicted. Exactly where he predicted. With exactly the logistics he calculated. And lost because the Soviets were ready. Because one commander listened. Because mathematics revealed what intelligence missed. That's the lesson. Not about war, about truth. Numbers reveal reality. People decide whether to accept it. Sometimes acceptance saves lives. Sometimes rejection kills thousands. Major Alexei Vasilevsky stood before Stavka on April 12, 1943, told them mathematics could predict war, showed them his calculations, warned them about Kursk, was ignored. Mocked. Rejected. July 5th, 1943. Everything he predicted came true. They stopped laughing, started listening. Too late for 25,000 men, but early enough for history to remember. What he said remains truth. Mathematics doesn't lie. Generals do.